Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Tanveer Alvi. I'm the training coordinator here at Clearwater. And once again, thank you for joining us today for this webinar. As you know, the webinar is Bridging Silos, Skills for Collaborative Impact. Now, before we begin, I would just like to do a small acknowledgement. So I am on Wurundjeri country right now. And Clearwater acknowledges the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people as the traditional owners of this land and pays respect to the elders past and present, and elders and people from other communities who may be here today. Now, before we start the webinar, I would just like to go through a few things. As you already know that your video, audio, and the chat function in this webinar is disabled. Feel free to ask any questions through the Q&A section. The presenters will try to answer your questions throughout the webinar, and we do have a separate Q&A section at the end, around 30 minutes towards the end of the webinar, and we will try to answer as many questions as we can during that time. Harsha would be moderating the Q&A section at the end. She is the program lead here at Clearwater. So without any further ado, let me introduce you our very first speaker, Dr. Stephanie Lavau. She is a senior lecturer in interdisciplinary environmental practice at the University of Melbourne. She researches through collaboration across professions, disciplines, sectors, communities, and regions, and partnerships for goals is core to her teaching and research strategy. So over to you, Stephanie. I'll stop sharing my screen now.
Thank you. Start sharing mine. Is that working okay for everyone? See the slides?
Yep, looks good.
Yep, excellent. So I'll acknowledge that I too am on Wurundjeri country here in Melbourne, and I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and thank them for their care for the lands and waters here for over millennia. So thanks for this invitation to do a bit of scene setting today. So I kind of understand my task is talking a bit about why we're interested in collaboration and partnerships, what kinds of collaboration we're talking about, what might be some of the challenges for collaborative practice, and I suppose heading us towards what are some of the qualities that might be important when we're thinking about effective collaboration. So a familiar slide, no doubt, to all of you. You're no doubt familiar with the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, coming from the United Nations Conference in Rio in 2012 as a set of universally agreed goals to meet environmental, political and economic challenges that we're facing. And you're no doubt familiar with this particular kind of presentation of the goals, which kind of reminds me of a periodic table from chemistry back in my youth. So we might think of these as the essential elements for a more sustainable future. And if you were to self-identify with particular elements in this periodic table, you might understand your work as contributing to number 6, clean water and sanitation, number 3, good health and well-being, 11, the sustainable cities and communities, and 12, responsible consumption, 13, climate action, 14, life below water, and then hopefully also right down there at the end, number 17, partnerships for the goals. Now, sometimes when I talk to people about number 17, partnerships for the goals, they're a little surprised to see it here as a goal. If we look at those other 16 goals, they're all focused on outcomes. And number 17 is focused on process. And arguably, there are many other aspects of process that might be crucial in thinking about our progress towards the other SDGs, and yet only this one warrants a goal. So why? Why is it that SDG 12 gets stated there as a goal? Well, few of you might be familiar with this version of presenting the goals, which I quite like and which I borrowed from the SDG Partnership Guidebook, which is produced by the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs and an NGO called the Partnering Initiative. And so here we can see that they've arranged the outcomes-oriented goals as a series of rings that reflect healthy environment, thriving society, and prosperous economy. And we can see here number 17, partnerships for the goals, rather than just being tacked on down the end, is instead here, threaded through the middle of those rings. And think about, what does this suggest about the relationship between SDG 17 and the others? So I think this kind of representation suggests that it's a goal that's at the heart of the other goals. It's foundational, perhaps, to achieving the others. So if we think back to that question of why partnerships is stated as a goal, yes, we might understand it as being foundational or core to progress on the other ones. But again, there are other qualities of process that might be important to the SDGs. And some of you might have heard of the Inner Development Goals, which is a kind of new parallel to the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, which focuses specifically on other aspects of process, such as integrity and self-awareness and resilience. So again, why are we focusing on this one? Why are we focusing on partnerships as something that needs our attention? With that guide that I mentioned, the Sustainable Development Guide to Partnerships, makes two arguments. Firstly, that perhaps it's really important that we start to think about partnerships as the new normal in addressing sustainable futures, and in our case, the sustainable water. So maybe we need to think about it as a starting point rather than as an exception. And I think that we need to be clear with such statements that we're not saying that partnerships or collaborative approaches are always required. It's not a good in and of itself. I'll come back to that later. The second argument that they make, so rather than perhaps it being a starting point, rather than an afterthought, is that we tend to presume the skills and knowledges for effective partnering and collaboration. We tend to presume that it's straightforward, there's nothing particular that we need, and they're trying to reinforce the idea that we should actively invest and commit to developing skills to be what they call fit for collaboration. And there's one reason why it's great to see an event such as this one today. It's a commitment to developing ourselves and reflecting upon what it might mean to be fit for collaboration. So I keep banding around the word partnerships, and I'd like to, I suppose, unpack a little bit about what I mean by this. So I understand a partnership to be a collaborative relationship in which competencies, resources, but perhaps also risk are shared in pursuit of a collective goal, some kind of collective goal or vision or objective. A relationship that's transformational in nature rather than transactional. And these kinds of relationships can obviously vary in their length. They can be a one-off activity, something that's time limited, or an ongoing relationship. They vary in their degree and type of commitment, whether we think about resources or the level of formality of the partnership. And they obviously vary in the types of outcomes being sought. And for whom. We have also, on the one hand, some kind of shared goal or vision, but also those of individual actors and organisations involved. So when we start to think about types of partnerships, we might start to reflect on who. And often, and including in that guide that I referenced, we see diagrams such as this, which draw our attention to multi-sector partnerships. And so we see here in the four corners of this diagram, business, non-government organisations, community and government. And the emphasis here, towards the centre is thinking about how these four different sectors come together to produce and operate in multi-sector partnerships. But I think that it's valuable for us to think of partnerships more broadly than this. So yes, multi-sector partnerships are really important, but I think in the kinds of partnerships that you're going to talk about and that you experience in your work, we're also thinking about collaboration, not just between sectors, but also within sectors. We're thinking about collaboration across organisations, both between and within organisations. We're thinking about collaboration between professions, what we might think of as interprofessional collaboration, including interdisciplinary collaboration. And this may even be internally within the same organisation. And I think we're also going to find ourselves thinking about collaboration across regions, nations, and communities. And so I think it's important that we broaden out our conversation about partnerships for the goals and partnerships in this case in sustainable water management as not just a question of these large multi-sector partnerships, but all these other kinds of scales and dimensions at which partnerships operate. Here's another question I think is quite important for us, and that is, what are the key drivers for partnerships for sustainability? As I said, I think it's really important that we don't just presume that collaboration is a good in and of itself. It's something that needs to be driven by purpose, needs to be purposeful. And I think it's really important that we ask the why question, the why partnerships question, because it determines the design of our collaboration. And the description for today focused us strongly on what I call the socio-ecological imperative. The idea that specialization is perhaps not a good fit to the nature of socio-ecological problems. Whether that be because they're wicked problems that are characterized by complexity, controversy, and uncertainty, or whether it be a question of the scale and the reach required to effectively engage with those problems. So this idea that responsibility for environmental sustainability might be distributed across corporate functions, agencies, departments, types of knowledge, portfolios, and so forth. And so when we talk about silos, this is an argument for partnerships that's about integrating some kind of elements that have been separated through, whether it's professional, institutional, or disciplinary specialization, in order so that we can create capacity and capability that matches the nature of the sustainability problems being addressed. So that's the most likely and most familiar, perhaps, driver for you for partnerships for sustainability. But I'd like to quickly point to two more. What I call the transformative moment. So we increasingly see a change in language in the last couple of decades when we're talking about sustainability. We used to talk a lot about sustainability transitions, and now we tend to talk more about transformation, which implies a need for more fundamental changes in economic, political, technical systems, in social practices, human values, and so forth to achieve sustainability. And this kind of implies a change in the scale of change, in the pace of change, and in the nature of change. So rather than thinking about, for example, just a change in attributes, we're thinking about some kind of change in essence when we think about transformation. And there are a lot of strong arguments made that to achieve innovation or radical change, that these kind of multi-sectoral, multidisciplinary, or cooperative approaches and environments provide a really solid foundation for the development of new ideas and new technologies and new services that speak to a need for transformation. So the second argument is for partnerships is that collaboration across organizations, sectors, knowledges, and so forth increases opportunities for radical change. And then the third one I'd like to draw attention to, we've got the silos at the top there as a wonderful metaphor. Here we've got the ivory tower. The ivory tower, often used as a metaphor to express that idea that knowledge is sometimes produced in a way that's disconnected from the practical concerns of everyday professional or personal life. And the ivory tower also speaks to a privileging of certain kinds of knowledge. And there are arguments made that we need more socially robust knowledge for sustainable futures. And what do they mean by socially robust? It's often used to refer to this idea that knowledge should be generated with clear line of sight or clear engagement with the context of application of that knowledge. That knowledge production should involve diverse specialists and social accountability. As this together is talked about sometimes as collaboration, as producing more socially engaged or relevant knowledge and action, and the importance of collaboration in allowing us to think and work with the specific social, institutional, and environmental contexts with which solutions must engage to be effective. So leading towards this then, what does it mean to be fit for collaboration? I think this is another key question for us today. What skills, knowledges, competencies, or other enabling attributes might be important? What does this mean for us as water professionals? I quite like this approach here, this partnership enabling ecosystem, this wheel, because it's really tempting to think about ourselves as individuals and focus our attention on the yellow segment there, individuals with partnering knowledge and skills. But I think it's really important for us to think about our role in these other segments of this wheel, not just on what makes us as individuals fit for partnering, but on what makes our organisations fit for partnering in the green there, how that might be supported in the sector by sharing good practice and guidelines in the light blue, which arguably we're doing today, and by the technical and social platforms in the dark blue there, as well as the policy environment that enables collaboration in the dark pink. So I think this is a really reminder, a good reminder of the different layers which we might think about what it means to be fit for collaboration and where as individuals we contribute to that for ourselves and for others. So if we're talking about what it means to be fit for collaboration, what are some of the qualities that we look for in good collaboration? What are some of the qualities for successful collaboration? I'm posting this here as a starting point for us to think with, and I'm really curious to see in the next hour which of these resonate most with you. These are the top 12 qualities that were identified in a study by Feist and colleagues in 2020. And they come from kind of like a meta-study of academic studies of collaboration in environmental management. And so they basically went through and did a bit of a frequency analysis with which different attributes or qualities were spoken about and what kind of importance was given to each to come up with a score of relative prominence in these studies. And so here's the top 12. And I'd put little asterisks next to these just because they're talked about a lot in academic literature doesn't mean they're the ones that are almost always important in practice. But nonetheless, a nice starting point for us. So, thinking about active, committed participation, the importance of shared deliberation and decision making, open dialogue and reflection, incorporating diversity of knowledge and diversity of views, being able to negotiate positions, risks, benefits, think about the distribution of power and agency, relationship building, developing shared understandings of solutions and the problems themselves, the social capital that might be derived from social and institutional networks, learning with and about others, and building trust in relationships. Now, I'm really interested to see if anything strikes you about this list. Which of these, and I invite you to post in the Q&A, which of these do you think was number one on their list? I've deliberately listed them in alphabetical order, but I'm really curious to see what do you think came in as number one. So please feel free to post your thoughts in the chat. One of the things that I find really interesting about this list is this. When we think about collaborative practice, we might think about several different aspects of our work. We might think about elements of managing and organising ourselves together. We might think about processes of thinking and acting together. And we might think about processes of relating to one another. And I would argue that in this list, we see a lot more of the latter. There's a lot of emphasis here on relating to one another. Now, you're no doubt keen to know what was number one on that list. It was this one here. It was trust building. Why is trust at the top of this list? And why am I going to focus on it in my final couple of slides? Well, I think that trust is firstly important to interconnected with many of those other qualities on the list. But I also think that it might function as a bit of a safeguard or a bit of a backstop. And I think there I probably betray my former life as a baseballer, the idea of a backstop, that if the other qualities fail somehow or aren't achievable in a moment, trust is something that can keep the collaboration going nonetheless, keep things going well. So if your partnership finds itself, for example, in an urgent situation with not enough time for shared deliberation, and you might need to rely on, a subset of people to make a decision, then trust is something that can, keep the collaboration going in good faith. So yes, trust building was number one on that list of qualities. And what might it mean in the context of partnerships for sustainable futures? I really like this little typology because I think we throw around the word trust quite a lot and we don't often stop to unpack what we might mean by it, what it might look like, and how we might get to it. So I find this is a really useful starting point. This distinction comes from a study of how different forms of trust develop and function in collaborative natural resource management. And the authors turned to the theory of trust, and here are 3 types of trust that they identified. This idea of rational trust, so trust which is based on the perceived likelihood of a positive outcome resulting from the actions of another partner. So it's often based on some kind of evaluation that we make or some kind of assessment that we make of a partner's past performance to therefore make a judgment on the likelihood of a positive outcome now. Affinitive trust is the second one. Affinitive trust coming from an affinity for or a sense of connection with another partner or actor in the collaboration. And that might emerge from shared positive experiences, from similar values, membership in common groups or communities, or responsiveness. So in our case, it might emerge as a shared concern around water or shared institutional values. And then the third kind, procedural trust, which is grounded in the existence of some kinds of guidelines, rules, or contract, or some other kind of mechanism for recording or monitoring that guides the behaviour of partners. These things create procedural trust by governing the ways in which we interact so that our interests are protected. This might be a legal agreement or a less formal agreement of some kind. And one of the interesting things about this study, which looked at a range of different NRM situations from high to low conflict, which involved a strong collaborative aspect. And they were also looking at how these different forms of trust were more or less important across the lifetime of a project. So they thought about the convening, getting the initial members together to think about, is there something we want to work on together? The recruiting, actually assembling the team and getting the collaboration up and running, and through to retention of partners and the ongoing maintenance of the relationship. And what they noted is that across the life of a partnership, all of these were important, but that some aspects were more important at different stages of collaboration. So affinitive trust, that trust through some kind of shared sense of connection amongst partners, was more important in the early stage for getting partners together to discuss a potential collaboration, but that rational and procedural trust gained importance for getting people on board and maintaining the partners, maintaining the partnership. So I just want to end with a kind of little example close to home that I'm working on, a large collaborative practice, a collaboration which is oriented around the question of how we might better manage stormwater in urban environments to support ecological health of urban waterways, including as habitat for the platypus, mitigate flood risk and supply non-potable water for households. And this is a project we're doing in the east of Melbourne around the catchment of the Monbulk Creek. This is a very large multi-institutional project looking at the hydrological and the ecological feasibility, but also the social and institutional feasibility of using smart networked rainwater tanks on public and private land alongside local storages to achieve those benefits of managing stormwater. So you can see, the logos across the bottom, some of the key partners, institutional partners, but we're also working with local residents and businesses and schools in installing tanks on their properties. And so just a final reflection then on what trust looks like in this partnership. So think about rational trust, that evaluation or assessment of a partner's past performance. One thing that was really important for us in getting some of the other partners on board was our track record, our history of already working together on other projects. Think about affinitive trust, that shared positive social experiences, values, etc. Our shared concern for stormwater impacts, our shared institutional values, or even thinking about the way in which we build trust with the local community, the face of the platypus as a shared concern, or even the act of planting trees along the waterway with residents. When we think about procedural trust, the ways, those elements that govern the ways in which we interact. So we have formal things such as a memorandum of understanding between the project team, but we also have a contract with residents themselves and with a data sharing agreement about how we use information about them and how we share that. And so I found that typology on trust really helpful as I progressed through this project. I keep coming back to those touchstones, those different kinds of trust, and thinking about what trust means, what kind of trust and between whom, and what are we doing and what might we do to better support trust in building our relationships. So that's a bit of food for thought as we lead into the other presenters. I just want to briefly acknowledge that actually the questions and the insights I've shared themselves come from a space of collaborative practice generated through working alongside Melbourne Water in the Melbourne Waterway Research Practice Partnership, also working with that project team on the Monbulk Creek Smart Water Network, but also in my teaching with students and my teaching team, Teaching Partnerships for Sustainable Futures. Thanks, and I'll hand over to our next speaker now.
Thank you, Stephanie. That was great. Thanks so much. So our next presenter in the lineup is, I'll quickly share my screen so that you can see a bit of a bio of hers. So we have Christy Good, who's coordinator of waterways from Blacktown City Council. She has extensive experience undertaking stakeholder engagement and relationship management, driving industry and organization needs analysis, capability uplift, and continuous improvement. So over to you, Christy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I'm going to see if my technology is going to play ball. Hey,
yep,
can you see my
working.
screen? Wonderful. So let me move that up there. So look, thank you very much for the opportunity to come and present to you today about, I guess, some of the experience from Blacktown Council and in our view, some of the skills that are needed for collaborative impact and bridging silos. I don't want to give control to you. I want to. Okay, so just some context for those of you who don't know. Blacktown Council is one of New South Wales' largest councils. We are located in the west of the Sydney CBD. We are one of the fastest growing councils in New South Wales. We have significant greenfield development happening in our northwest growth area. And by 2050, we expect to have a population of over 600,000 residents. I will also take this as an opportunity to acknowledge the Darug people, who are the traditional custodians of Blacktown, and very proud to say that we also have one of the highest First Nations populations, not only of Darug, but also First Nations people in general in New South Wales. So that is wonderful for us and also provides a significant opportunity also for collaboration. I said I'm going to whip through very quickly some, I guess, our experience and focusing around our journey towards Six Streams. Six Streams is our integrated water strategy, and this strategy was adopted by our council in 2020, and it really sets out the vision that we are aspiring to transform Blacktown into a water-sensitive city through sustainable water management. Again, for those of you who of you who don't know, Blacktown is really, really hot. We get significantly hot days in summer. We get really intense rainfall. We've got flooding that comes from backflow from the Hawkesbury-Nepean River. There are some significant challenges that we have that we really need to manage our water, but also with those challenges, I guess, comes opportunities. Having said that, we cannot do it alone, and collaboration is key, but bridging the silos that exist is even more important. Now, this is just, excuse me, a little bit of a snapshot. This here is some of the key sections in council who have a responsibility in helping to transition our city. So you've got people like our asset designers who are designing, our big regional basins and our passively irrigated street trees. You've got recreational planning and design who are planning, recreation in and around our waterways. Our open space maintenance and civil asset maintenance people who are required to maintain a lot of the assets that we're building. You've got asset planning and support who are absolutely key in helping us to manage long-term this infrastructure. We've got our environment team. And I've put finance and people and culture down there because we really can't underestimate the value that they play. So people and culture in particular, helping us to work with and make sure our staff have the right skills that they need to do what they need to do, but also finance. They speak the talk of finance, like how can we work with them to build the business cases that we need to build to do the work that we need to do. Now, coming across to utilities and state government, it's equally important, and we cannot transition to a water sensitive city without these people. Sydney Water, again, for those of you who don't know, in Sydney, Sydney Water manages some stormwater services across our city, but by and large it's local government. They also manage our wastewater network. And then you've got the Department of Climate Change, Energy, the Environment and Water, who are setting a lot of the policy in this space. You've got the Department of Planning, Housing and Infrastructure, who are setting also a lot of the DCPs, and which are development control plans and state environmental planning policies for our northwest growth area. So it's a real challenge for us to be able to navigate all of that and be able to work with those organisations to, I guess, get a consistent vision of what we want to achieve and implement in Blacktown. And I've also put out here, there's other really key groups that we work with, and I've just named a couple here. So the Parramatta River Catchment Group has been on a mission for the last 15 years to make the Parramatta River swimmable again. Stormwater New South Wales, our peak industry association. We know one of the biggest threats to waterway health and becoming a water sensitive city is the impact of stormwater into our waterways. So working with organisations, if Stormwater New South Wales is really important, and more broadly industry, which I'll touch on shortly. So what I've tried to do is just pick 3, I guess, practical examples of how of projects that we've needed to collaborate. And on the next slide, I'll talk about the skills that were important. So this is an example of us setting up a water sensitive urban design task force within council. Again, most of you will know water sensitive urban design is a key component or tool in our toolkit, so to speak, to be able to implement a water sensitive city. It protects our waterways, it provides blue-green infrastructure that gives all those environmental and community outcomes that we need. So we do have a really strong focus on water sensitive urban design within our council. One of the first things is we needed to identify that there had to be a problem or an opportunity for us to collaborate on. And we realised that WSUD assets were not being managed optimally across their whole life cycle. And why did we need to collaborate? Because there were so many people in council that had a touch point with this, from our asset planning and support people who managed the asset management framework, to finance who didn't quite understand why these assets were important, again to people and culture. So there was a range of people that we wanted to get into the room to start to collaborate, to work out how we can do this better. And some of the outputs were, for the first time in Blacktown Council's journey, we're actually able to map all of the stakeholders that had an interface in water sensitive urban design. And that was really significant piece of work, because there are so many people that didn't even consider, or sections that didn't even consider that they had a touch point. And the other thing that we're able to do was new and improved processes. So two, for example, are the inspection of assets and the handover of the WSUD system. Some of the outcomes that we're able to achieve was the integration of WSUD assets into Council's asset management framework based on ISO 55001. And that was really key, because prior to that, WSUD assets were always seen as a separate asset, something different, not integral as part of Council's asset management framework. So that realisation was really, really important and wouldn't have come about without this collaboration. And it's also set the foundation of building trust and effective working relationships with key staff. So, you know, when I reflect back on what were the environment and the skills that were key in making this a successful collaboration, good interpersonal skills, you know, you need to be able, and good communication skills, you need to be able to talk to people. Patience. Patience was really important. You know, not everybody wanted to be in the room at first, and it took, you know, it took a number of meetings and trying to get across what that shared understanding of what was the issue that needed to be resolved and why everybody had leadership in the game. Took leadership. It's very hard to try and, you know, set these things up, leadership and persistence, set these things up, try a couple of meetings that failed. Oh, okay, we'll move on to the next thing. So there was persistence, that people kept turning up and going, no, this is something that we need to work with, we need to collaborate on, and coming back to trust. That was really important, building trust in our relationships with sections that perhaps there wasn't a lot of trust in the past, was really key. The second example I'll speak to is the implementation of 6 streams, our integrated water strategy. So this was, again, across council, but it also involved key stakeholders, you know, such as Sydney Water, a key stakeholder. So what was the opportunity? We had a strategy that was adopted and we needed to implement it. And the only way that we could do that was by working with across council and with our key stakeholders. So some of the key outputs is we have a regular water group meeting, which pull a broader range of people across council together. We've recently went out and put a community waterway satisfaction survey together to better understand our community and why the levels of satisfaction were dropping. We've drafted a waterway management plan that really gives guidance to all sections across council in how they can play a role in better manage their waterways. And really fabulous about this is being able to work with teams that, again, traditionally didn't see themselves as having a role in, you know, integrated water management, going, yeah, I can own that. Like, we have a role, our team has a role to play. And also checklists for staff to consider to implement blue-green infrastructures. And again, I think one of the key outcomes is those effective working relationships with key staff across council, such that you know who your allies are in the organisation and who you need to go and speak to if there's a problem or an opportunity that you might see. Some of the environment and the skills were key. Again, it's a shared understanding that there are opportunities that can be realised only if we work together. I've highlighted extensive professional network because that is really key, and I will come back to that in my last slide. Good interpersonal skills, including willingness to compromise. Like, things don't always go your way. Things don't always, turn out how you want it to turn out, but it's really important that you go into those collaborative settings with that mindset. Good communication skills, leadership. Again, this doesn't just happen by accident. You need to keep turning up. You need to keep meeting with these people and leading and advocating for these things. And negotiation. So, in the development of the draft waterway management plan, we started with, X number of actions and we've got to Y number of actions. So couldn't get it in this round, but it's not to say that we can't get it in perhaps in the next round. The final example that I will just speak to is the SQUID, so Stormwater Quality Improvement Device Task Force. And this is a collaboration across industry. So stormwater quality improvement devices are, again, another tool in our toolkit that we can protect our waterways. We've got a significant litter issue in Blacktown Council, so our squids are working really hard, and there are a number of issues with squids. So in terms of Blacktown Council, we were being seen as the proxy for the approval of new stormwater quality improvement devices across Sydney and to some extent across New South Wales. So to put some context into this, there's a process that, a national process that squids can be approved to assess the pollutant efficiency of those, and some councils or stakeholders accept them for use in their city and others don't. So we were often being come to, do you approve it? If not, why not? Can we get it approved through you? And it just wasn't feasible, and nor should Blacktown Council make this decision in isolation. So it was really important that we brought together stakeholders from across all of industry. So councils, manufacturers, maintenance providers, water utilities, industry organisation, all of us come together, and I think there was about 5,000 volunteer hours that we've worked on over the last 9 months to come up with 176 recommendations to improve the assessment and management of squids. And this is by far probably the most successful collaborative project I've ever worked on. Working across so many industry stakeholders was fabulous, because traditionally we really were working in silos and not understanding the issues from different perspectives. So we were really able to get down deep and understand what the different challenges were to different stakeholders and break down those silos. And the other key outcome is already we've got manufacturers thinking differently about their products and the needs of their clients to ensure effective asset management. Again, some of the skills, the environment and skills that were key: shared understanding that there was an issue that needed to be resolved, a clearly defined scope. You can't collaborate perhaps on everything that you want to. So what is that scope? What is it that you're trying to achieve? Leadership, again, perseverance and patience, dedication and commitment. Like, these were volunteers doing this largely outside of their normal 9-to-5 job. I've got highlighted their active listening. That was really important, really key. And I've got there is something to be learned from everyone. So absolutely, you need to give space for everybody in that room to speak. Humility, not always your viewpoint is the right viewpoint, and negotiation. So if I was to sum it up, and if I was to really sit back and think about those and other collaborative partnerships that I personally and Blacktown Council have been involved in, and if I was to give some really top these are the ones that I think that are really important. It's identifying a common goal, like what is it that unites you in the work and why is it beneficial to all stakeholders? That is key. If you can't convince others why they need to be in the room and why they need to work with you and what the benefit is, then it's not going to be very successful. You need to be opening to listening to different perspectives and views. So the lens that some stakeholders see as a problem, challenge, or opportunity isn't always the same, but it is equally important, and it needs to be listened to, and it needs to be worked through. It's okay to challenge perspectives respectfully. There's all kinds of diversity out there in thinking, and be prepared to challenge that, but always make sure it's respectfully. Do not underestimate the value of networking and building your professional circle, because these people can become your allies when collaborating on projects. And I really didn't understand the value of this until I attended Andre's and Griffith University's International Water Leadership Program, and I think Andre's on the call. But it is so important to build that professional circle, because they will become your allies when you've got an opportunity or a problem. You know who you can reach out to, who you can help, who can help you on a project. And those incidental coffee chats or lunch catch-ups are invaluable. Like so many opportunities or problems or silos are broken down just by having those informal chats. So that is really, really key. Leave your title at the door. Doesn't matter if you're CEO or you have a PhD or if you're an officer, because your views are equally important to help form a rounded outcome. And I also flag trust. Like, you need to have confidence that you can rely on your partners, that they can rely on you, and that you'll follow through what you say you will do. And I often come back to this. I love this. You know, if you want to go fast, go alone. That's fine. You'll get there quick. But if you want to go far, like, you really need to go together with those collaborative networks that you've built. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Really good. Moving on to our next presenter, Philip Penesi. He is an urban water scientist with the Derwent Estuary Program. He co-leads projects with the Derwent Estuary Program partners aimed at restoring and promoting the estuary region in Hobart. A key part of his role is bridging the gap between science and policy. So over to you, Philip.
Perfect. Thanks for that, Tanvi. And just checking everyone can see my screen there, just if a thumbs up would be fine.
Yep, looks good to me.
Yep, perfect. So yeah, as Tanvi mentioned, I'm Philip Penesi. I'm the urban water scientist at the Derwent Estuary Program, and we're a unique not-for-profit here in Hobart, formed solely based on the strength of our local partnerships, which I'll get a little bit into, and some of the challenges, but also some of the opportunities that we've had from overcoming those, governmental silos, bureaucratical silos, but also getting all the stakeholders together to have some successful actions throughout our local environment. So just to give you a little bit of perspective, so the Derwent catchment, which is the figure there in the white, it covers about a fifth of Tasmania's landmass. So to put that into perspective, there's quite a wide array of stakeholders that we actively engage with on a regular basis. So this could be anything from the local councils, it could be landowners, it could be private and public industry, and obviously state governments weaved through that. So we've got a lot of varied touch points, and I guess a big part of what we do is identifying which of those stakeholders need to be present at any given time based upon what project we might be looking for. So a little bit about us. So as I mentioned, we're a not-for-profit partnership between state, local government, industries, and as it doesn't mention here, the community. The community is a really big part of what we do, and a couple of our partners are listed there as logos before. And this program started about 25 years ago, so in the early 2000s, and it was in response to a need for an organisation or a body to become the voice of the Derwent. So there wasn't necessarily a state government department or a local agency focusing solely on these issues. So it was kind of dribs and drabs off the sides of people's desks. And there was a need for getting everybody together to work collaboratively, but also using that science, using that information to both enhance the environment from an environmental perspective, but also inform things like policy, guidance from local councils, state government, industry, and really being able to present this information into varying stakeholders and also into the community in a way that they can understand. So taking it away from that really hardcore science analytical perspective and actually having that information available in a number of different formats where all different partners can engage with that. And that's a really crucial part of the program and a big part of what we do. So a big part of, again, what's important to the people. So in this respect, people is our partners directly. So you're talking local and state governments, industries, but also importantly to the community. So what does this group or what does this partnership, what's important to it in order to be able to overcome these issues and, you know, these opportunities that might arise? And things like governance are really important. So can an organisation, say for example like ours, exist in an apolitical sense? So we're not necessarily dictated by a certain agenda that might be in Parliament at the time. We're not dictated by trying to show a certain type of narrative. A big part of what we are trying to do is be transparent. So all the information that we present is publicly available. And that was a really key component, both from our partners, but also from the community, to have a better understanding about where the things we are doing really, really well, and maybe other areas where we could be looking at opportunities or projects to, you know, better understand or better mitigate some of the issues with that. And out of that, there's a few things that kind of pop out, and the infographic on the right is a really good example of some of the various use cases, tourism, economic benefits and things around the estuary. But water quality, it sounds quite broad, but understanding how water quality and aspects of water quality that might be important to things like swimming, they might be important to things like fishing and what fish that can be available. Looking also at the wastewater industry and understanding about their possible impacts on water quality throughout the estuary and how they can mitigate some of those impacts. We're quite unique here in Hobart where we have still quite extensive heavy industry on the estuary, and there was historic metals contamination quite widespread throughout the estuary. So getting an understanding about how we can, you know, identify that that has occurred in the past, but obviously there's a big stride in that space to improve the perception of metals within the estuary, and how can we respond to that as we're sort of going through time. Metals aren't actively put into the estuary anymore, but that legacy contamination is still a big issue. Biodiversity, and this one sort of, it's probably pivoted a little bit more in recent times. So obviously the natural environment and also the built urban environment, but a really key part of that is the history, both Indigenous and European history, but also access to these environments. So typically in the past, these environments might be difficult to get to, or, you know, recreation and things like that might be not applicable in these areas. Is there a way that we can bring the community along, potentially with partnerships through councils or through state government, to make these areas more accessible, more pleasant to the local community to engage with this space and really enhance that sense of stewardship between the local community, but also more broadly the partnership? And finally, participation. So again, in any successful partnership, we're wanting all the partners to be involved, you know, in whatever capacity that is. And we are acutely aware that, you know, resourcing and financial pressures really kind of dictate where some of those priorities may lay in any given time. So being able to keep our participation opportunities quite open so that partners, when they've got the capacity to, they can be more engaged or less engaged within the partnership, but still feeling connected to the overall mission. And for us, that's culminated in a few different things. And I'll talk to a couple of the big monitoring programs that we do. But other ways that we do this are, you know, really big snapshot reports for the estuary and really focusing on, you know, a community focusing lens, a scientific focusing lens, but also a policy and a local government, state government perspective lens as well. So as I alluded to, we do a lot of our projects are all partnership based. So it was a little bit difficult to kind of determine a few of the better examples, but the two that I'm going to bring to today are our long-standing monitoring programs. One looking at beach water quality, and the other looking at ambient water quality within the estuary. So ambient water quality for us is particularly nutrients, so sourced from wastewater treatment plants, metals from the previous industry, but also looking at things like water clarity, temperature, ocean acidification, things like that. And these programs are unique in the fact that they've been ongoing in the Derwent for about 30 years. So we've got quite long-standing data sets, and we've got a really good understanding of how that's changed over time, but also where those priorities may have changed over the 30-year period. For these programs to be successful, however, the collaboration aspect was really, really crucial. We physically, with the 4 or 5 staff that we have at the Derwent Estuary program, we can't feasibly go across and sample all the extensive sites and all the extensive parameters across the estuary. So a collaboration with our partners to actually undertake some of that work, help with the reporting elements of it, highlighting areas of opportunity in these projects is really important. So direct sampling support, report writing support is something that's always been integrated into this program. So there's a big sense of ownership throughout the wider Derwent Estuary community about these 2 programs having some kind of touch point with them. And we've recently moved into the space of looking at stormwater as well. So opening up to all those facets where our various partners may be involved in this water quality space and what out of that information is important to them. So some groups for Beachwatch, for example, it might be things around public safety. So where can we say sites are suitable to swim and not? And if they're not suitable to swim, what are some of the solutions that may arise to bring that back into a safe swimming guideline? And alongside that is being transparent. So these programs have a public facing element as part of that. And there's always a lot of engagement, both with us directly, but also with stakeholders like local governments, water utilities and state government representatives about these programs being a bit of a touch point between them and the community. And the community can use these programs as a way to advocate for certain issues within their local area, or advocate internally within councils for things like budget bids for infrastructure programs or new resource positions and things like that. And fundamentally, this is to, I guess, provide data and provide a bit of that scientific backing to drive that environmental management. So looking at this evidence-based environmental management approach and bringing along these stakeholders to understand what's important to them, what information do they need to know from a scientific lens in order to make decisions within their respective environment. And that varies, as you can imagine, between a local government and the projects that they may be undertaking versus a water utility, which is going to have a different suite of opportunities, a different suite of infrastructure projects that it may be looking at encompassing upon into the future. So a few of the main things that kind of come up, and the collaboration aspect for us, as I've said, it's been a long-standing partnership between these organisations, is that continued strength. So it's, for us, it's not something that we've collaborated once and it's something that we are just going to leave and it's, situationally based. A really big part of breaking down silos is having this continued collaboration. So where the opportunities arise, ensuring that the partnership is always strengthening and making a really conscious effort to collaborate as well. So we can be, I guess, guilty within organisations as, when an opportunity arises, we're really keen to collaborate, but outside of those opportunities, we might find ourselves going back into our own internal silos. So a program like ours allows for this continued partnership between these multi-stakeholders to occur all the time, whether or not it's at a really full-fledged capacity or whether it's just a touch point. It could be a quarterly meeting or it could be a working group that we might convene every few months just to bring the stakeholders together to see if there's any grievances or any opportunities that have arisen within, the period that we've last talked about. Another key element of that is the knowledge sharing. So, a big issue with silos is that knowledge that, individuals and organisations have. It can be really difficult to draw out that information to where it may be relevant to other partners. And there are instances of commercial in confidence where they may not be applicable, but a big part of what we're trying to do is when there is information available that a certain partner or a certain organisation maybe have benefit in, facilitating that conversation either through us or directly with that other partner to allow that knowledge sharing forum to occur, whether it's formally through, a task force or some sort of formal meeting, or whether it's an informal email, an informal conversation, just to really promote that cross-pollination between governments, industry, and the community. Other things include infrastructure improvements. So obviously this information that we're collecting from the Derwent estuary and obviously the catchment surrounding it can be used as a way to prioritise infrastructure improvements. So that's something that's really important to councils to understand when they've got limited budget or limited resources. Where do I start, and why is starting somewhere else more important than, you know, another site location? So that's a really big part, and we've seen a lot of improvement, particularly in our beach watch space, where stormwater catchments, there may be the infiltration between wastewater and stormwater systems causing public health alerts at certain beach sites. So actually working directly with the councils and also the water utility to both investigate and identify those issues, but then putting in those improvements or starting to plan for those improvements to occur within that catchment, and ultimately at the end of it seeing some sort of improvement at the end of pipe or the beach catchment. And finally, the community education is a big thing, and Steph alluded to it earlier, but they're a stakeholder that they are, I guess, challenging to collaborate with directly, because it can seem a little bit daunting about who in the community to collaborate with, or who is the best organisation, community group to collaborate with. A big part of this program and the way that we do that is providing that information to the community. So knowing when to engage with the community, what the community wants to hear, but also bringing the community in when there's opportunities arises. So things like swimmable cities and, you know, increasing the number of recreational sites within the Greater Hobart region, for example, bringing the community together to understand where some of these areas might be. Is there an area where an open water swimming club already exists, and can we leverage that community nous within that local area alongside our relationships with local councils and the state government to prioritise some of these areas, and really capitalising on that community push. And the community is a really good asset in this space to help advocate on behalf of different opportunities and different environments. And I guess it comes back to, you know, with a lot of these things is where do we start? And that's a really big thing that we constantly are always coming back to, with new partners coming on board, different relationships with our existing partners, and some of the challenges and opportunities that might present, you know, for us here in Hobart, but also more broadly across the country. And I'll say straight off the bat, breaking down silos is really difficult. It's not something that you can do really quickly necessarily. It's not something where you are necessarily going to get an outcome immediately. And it's something that may require a little bit more time, a little bit more finesse to get some of those conversations started. Understanding who to talk to as well is really important. And obviously there's challenges around that, particularly within levels of government. So building up that professional network, as Christy mentioned, but also understanding within an organisation the problem that we're trying to determine, and understanding where that perspective may be best to come from, or which perspectives do we need in the room. So that's really important to understand that broader picture. And a really good way to sort of describe that is to position yourself as a little bit of what they call a T-shaped professional. So a T-shaped professional has a really good understanding of their core understanding. So it could be your university background, it could be your technical background, it could be your policy background, whatever that is. But having an understanding about where those other partners may be coming in from, and being able to understand within their language and also their understanding as to the problem that we're discussing, what might they be thinking from their lens? And is there a way that we can compromise on a solution or look for an opportunity that may not have already been present? I'd also like to highlight that another big challenge, limited resources and funding, is obviously everywhere across the country. And again, particularly here in Hobart and Tassie, around getting the resources and getting the funding. But I would like to say that a lot of times this can lead to pretty creative solutions. So once those partnerships are established and those silos are broken down, you generally will find that a lot of these partners are willing to help provide, for example, sampling support, or help, providing some advice with reporting and things like that. So these creative solutions can generally organically happen within these partnerships. So that continued approach to work on partnerships and continued approach to engage within your partners and bringing people in is really important to, allow for these creative solutions to organically appear. Opportunities, again, this is looking at when these arise within certain things, and a big part of that, again, as we've all alluded to, is building trust. So how do we build trust? And, for us, that's about bringing people with us. So co-designing projects with them, capturing their experience. So for example, it could be a local community group's experience, it could be a local council's experience, it could be a state government experience, but bringing all those people together to, identify the problem that we're trying to overcome, and having that as a pathway to build trust, because trust isn't something that's built overnight, and it's not something that you can build once and then forget about. It's something that we're constantly working on, constantly trying to improve and build further that trust within our organisation, but also within our partnership and our broader network. And a really big part of that is establishing the common purpose. So for us, it could be things like water quality, but for a council, that could be water quality and its impact on public amenity. And for a community group, it could be, how can I engage with my local environment? Is there a way that I can become a community steward through a local land care group or a local coast care group? So really having that common purpose, and for us, that's to be the voice of the Derwent. It is quite broad, but it does allow for a lot of different perspectives to come in and use the information that we've collected, both ourselves and with our partners, to enhance their individual perspective. They're the expert in that space. So is there a way that we can leverage that information and support them where some of that information might not be available? And finally, I'd like to say is particularly around impacts. So when you're talking about silos and you're talking about partnerships, there's a number of challenges and barriers, both new, so when you initially set up partnerships, but also ongoing barriers and challenges. And these could arise for specific projects, or, when there's certain governmental decisions and things like that. And really understanding as a partnership and as a group, can we come together? Can we overcome these problems? Can they lead and help us establish these creative solutions? And not necessarily seeing these as a stop. We have to stop collaborating. We have to stop working on this project that we're looking at. It may require us to pivot a little bit, but understanding that these challenges are always going to occur, and being able to adapt both internally, but also as a partnership as a whole, is really, really important. And I'll leave it there and look forward to questions in the Q&A.
Thanks for that, Philip. That was really good. I especially like the thing that you mentioned initially about knowledge being available to everyone and through different formats. So thanks for that. Moving on to our last presenter for this webinar, Shelley Shepherd. She is a director at Urbaqua, which is a not-for-profit organization driving water and environmentally sensitive outcomes. She champions livable communities that adapt to environmental and climatic challenges. She is also the deputy chair at Perth Water Sensitive Transition Network, leading collaborative strategies to advance water-sensitive cities. Her expertise in strategic planning and facilitation brings a strong focus on collective intelligence to deliver sustainable, resilient urban solutions. I'll just quickly put in that she's also program manager at New Waterways. So over to you, Shelley.
Thanks, Tanvir. That's great. Thanks so much. Okay, so I have started sharing my screen. Is everybody able to see that?
Yep, looks good.
And yeah, the thumbs up would be great too. Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much for having me today. This is a really important topic to actually get sort of outcomes together. We need to bring people together. But of course, I would like to acknowledge that I am on Whadjuk Noongar Boodja and pay my respects to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people all across the country, and thank them sincerely for their love of country, of people, of culture, and their care for this incredible landscape over the last thousands of years. So today I am going to talk about Perth Water Sensitive Transition Network. So it's a collaborative group that is coming up to its 10th year, which is quite exciting. So first of all, I just want to sort of say, what's our why? So I think we've heard from the speakers so far that we need to have a common purpose. That's what Phil said. So we have to, why are we all joining together to actually work together? So just very quickly, I should have also said I'm from Perth in Western Australia. I don't have a map, and I hope that everybody knows where we actually are. So in WA, what was the history of urban water management or water sensitive urban design? So over here, WSUD is more than just stormwater. It's the whole integrated water management system. So where did the idea come from? We have a planning policy. We have some guidelines that say water is a planning matter. And as part of our development system, we need to consider that and try and develop water sensitive communities. So luckily we have the policy side of things. That came in sort of like the early 2000s. But we recognised that we needed to build capacity in our industries to be able to do that. Hence, New Waterways was born. And I have to acknowledge that we based it largely on Clearwater. So it's part of our group of capacity building organisations that are all represented today that have all come together to deliver this webinar, of which Kirsty and Phil are part of this group that we've been going for a long time now. So to get people to understand the why and get this collaborative and collective impact, we need to build capacity. So that's what our capacity building programs were on. That's just a bit of the program, but halfway through is where we joined up with the CRC for water sensitive cities. So we have been on this amazing journey. It started over 10 years ago, and I have to acknowledge the CRC for water sensitive cities, particularly the team at Monash University, because without them I don't think we would have got where we have got to. And as part of this process of developing the policy, they helped us recognise that we need to have this common purpose, and then we needed a collective vision, because delivering a water sensitive city is a wicked problem. It's really difficult. You don't know what you need to do, and you have to go on that journey to actually get there. So this group of people embarked on and it's actually the group of people has been changing over the last 10 years, obviously, but we all came together to deliver this common vision, and the CRC helped us work that out. We had described what the vision is. We then developed a series of implementation plans so that we all knew collectively what we needed to do. We knew it was a big, broad vision, and we used the CRC's tools, as you can see a couple of those tools there on the slide, to help us work out what we needed to do and then measure our progress. And that was part of this journey. And as I've sort of recognised, we signed up with the CRC in 2012. We have actually done some amazing things. So water sensitive urban design as part of our landscapes is something that everybody does now, particularly in greenfield areas, but we also are retrofitting. So you can see some landscapes there where passive irrigation of street trees, collecting the stormwater off the roads, creating green, creating areas of biodiversity. We have retrofitting, single purpose infrastructure. We're increasing access to public open space. There's so many fantastic outcomes that we're seeing all the way across the Perth and Peel, and also throughout the rest of the state, which is fantastic. So how actually did we do it? This group of people are so diverse, and I think nobody saw anybody's slides previously, so I want to thank everybody for saying pretty much the same thing, and we're all reinforcing this idea of trust. So that was great, Steph. That was the first one, because sort of you see all of those things and you know they're all necessary. But this group of people who've been together for so long, trust is one of those critical things. So we've got a high degree of knowledge and commitment results in this trust between the people. The other thing about the transition network is the roles and responsibilities not defined. You're there to bring the organisation you work for, you bring their perspective with you, and you're able to talk about it, but you don't necessarily always represent that organisation. And it gives you that flexibility to be able to respond to whatever's coming out, the new opportunities that you see and the demonstrations. The other part to this group is we obviously work collaboratively, and we've got those agreed goals there, outlined in a vision, they're outlined in the implementation plan, and it gives us this collective vision. So we all know what we're all working towards. It's almost like a big pie, and everybody can deliver their small slice of the pie, and together you get something that's really yummy, and something that's really going to work. And I think it was also Kirsty who said there's no need for logos or egos. The independence and the informality of this group is what really creates success. So we've had a really broad membership. There's a whole list of people there, and it's growing all the time. I have to acknowledge it is difficult to keep up the momentum, particularly with all the challenges, and I'll come to those in a minute. But we have this ability to work towards this collective vision, monitor it, report, and celebrate that performance. So you can see we were one of the first cities to be benchmarked using the CRC's tool in 2016. We redid it in 2021, and it was fantastic to see that there had been some progress towards the goals. Those 4 squares at the bottom of my slides also represent each of the vision themes. So we have these themes of our action that we're working towards, and everybody's comfortable acknowledging the areas that we have to work within, and that's what the strategy provides us. We are going to be re-benchmarked in 2026 because that will be our 10 years of working together. So it would be really interesting to see how we've performed then. But the other thing that we have to acknowledge that impacts our ability to collaborate, it impacts our ability to trust sometimes, is these crazy changes that are ahead. We have seen that climate change over here is quite significant. We don't have drought, we have climate change, and our rainfall is just going to be in decline forever. So we have to acknowledge that. We see livability, and the housing crisis is a significant political influence that we have. There is also the perception sometimes that the green stuff, you have to pay a bit more for it. It's not, it's just a nice to have, not being essential. So how do we continue to that momentum in these ever increasing and more difficult situations that we have? So I'm being very short because we were told 10 minutes. So we'll at least have a couple of minutes for the Q&A, which would be great. So the idea really is that we've got to deliver it together. The diversity and perspective, knowledge and approach is really, really critical, and forming true partnerships with trust as that foundation. That's what we're trying to deliver. So we want to collaborate and empower. We've got to share this risk that we're seeing. The human sensory network, you know, that's the power in the people. I think everybody's said it's not about who you represent or what level you're at. Everybody's thoughts are really valid and really important. And if we can understand what people see and think, then we can influence the political will as well, because it's made up from social license and community expectations. There is deep uncertainty coming at us, there's no doubt about it, but we can use that because it makes us feel a little bit uncomfortable and will help us change the status quo. So those are just, the next thing is that the water sensitive city framework. We've got to link that through to the other tools that we have available. So the CRC came up with livable, resilient, sustainable, productive. And it's very interesting that the Australian government's urban policy has those 4 things and adds equitable, which is a brilliant addition. So if these are the things that we want our city to achieve, we've all now got this collaborative vision. And of course, doing it together is better. And everybody had their quote, didn't they? Alone we can do so little, and together we can do so much. So that's all I have today. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Shelley. That was great. Well, I'll now invite all the speakers and Harsha for a Q&A / panel discussion. So if Stephanie, Christy, and Philip, you can just come back again to your videos or microphones. We do have some questions in the Q&A section, and for people who are there, please keep adding your questions to that section, and we'll try and answer all of them. Thank you.
Thanks, Tina, and thanks to all the speakers. I think that they all made some fantastic points. There was a lot of good information packed in there of what constitutes, successful collaboration, and in the dynamic and maybe uncertain world that we are living in today. Like collaboration is the way to go. I might start with Christy. There's a question about you spoke about trust, and I mean everyone, that was one common thread across all experiences and presentations, the importance of trust as a key skill in relationship. However, I guess the challenge is that all relationships or all partnerships are not equal. So how can we, achieve trust in asymmetric relationship? When things are not equal. And you have to work with your partner because you can't achieve your objectives without your partner. So what do we do in such an instance?
Yeah, sure. No, thank you, Sam. That was a really good question. And look, I've tried to respond to it in the chat, but how I would go about that, because inevitably we get that often, that there's one person or a blocker, as we like to call them, in an organisation, and it's really hard. Like, you can't achieve the objectives that you want to do, but the way I try and get around that is actually build extensive networks within an organisation. So it's not just having one go-to person in an organisation, because you go to one person and they might be the blocker, but there's most likely lots of other people in that organisation who actually are aligned with the vision that you want to create. So it's about that professional network, expanding that network, understanding who in those organisations are aligned with the vision that you're trying to create, or the opportunity or problem that you're trying to solve, and working with them. And it's not by being sneaky to go in the back door and go, hey, I need you to work with me, but it's using those networks, so they in turn in meetings that they're having, and it's almost by stealth. So in conversations and meetings that they're having, they're starting to plant seeds and ideas, and it kind of creates a groundswell. So it may not happen straight away, it may never happen, but that's where I think the value in not putting all your eggs in one basket are really important in building that network.
Yeah, thanks, Christy. I think these are some good points. So I guess this all leads to the conclusion that perhaps like one skill or one attribute, there's not only one factor that contributes that leads to successful collaboration, but there are a number of factors. And I think the fact that starting early, achieving that common purpose was things that were like repeatedly mentioned across the speakers today. So Christy, I will stay with you. I think in your presentation you mentioned about 4,000 volunteer hours. There was about 4,000 volunteer hours. So
5,000.
How do we 5,000 volunteer hours, which is huge. Like, how do you achieve that level of commitment? And also there's exec and senior support for staff. Does that contribute towards that level of involvement?
Yeah, again, another good question. So in terms of the SQUID task force, how did we get that involvement? Look, traditionally it's been, as I said, we have operated in silos. So, a call was made to the industry. Anyone can participate in this task force. Your opinions are all viewed, they're all valued. We want you at the table. So first of all, opening it up to everybody, and then workshopping. Like, the first workshop was really that scoping workshop. Like, what is it that we want to achieve? Why are we in the room? Like, what's our skin in the game? So if people could see what it was we were trying to deliver and the benefit that their organisations or their stakeholder group was going to get, then they were more likely to participate and keep showing up. So that scope, that benefit was really, really important to set up front. It was hard. Like, it was hard because, as I said, a lot of these people did it after their normal 9-to-5 job. But it also came from a place of dedication. Like, I think most of us who work in this industry actually are passionate and love what we do and genuinely want to make a difference. So I think there was really real goodwill in the room that we can make a difference and fill some of these gaps. So, and that's where leaving the title at the door came. Like, it was really important that, didn't matter if you're a CEO of a company or an officer, like, you've got something to share, which is equally as important. In terms, and I'm not sure, in terms of getting support from executive, again, it's not something that we necessarily go to our executive and say, hey, will you support us being on this? Sometimes it's better to to seek forgiveness than ask permission. But certainly where we try to make our executive aware of the work that we're doing through, be it memos and, this is what we're doing, these are the partners that we're working with, this is the benefits of it, posting LinkedIn posts, getting our partners to, to say, it's been great working with Blacktown Council on such and such a project. And that like our executives and our CEO and our councillors see that, and then they see the importance, and it's validated. So, and I would say that our council is very supportive. Our motto is building the best, and we know that to do that, we have to be working with partners. So I think it's actually considered as business as usual, and our staff have permission to work with partners and work collaboratively.
Yeah, that's fantastic response, and again, lots of good points to that. We are running out of time, so I will I will ask a final questions, hopefully to all panel members, to finish with. So how important is national collaboration, and do you think there is a gap in the urban waterway or urban water management area, or integrated water management area? That's open to all our panels.
I'm happy to let someone else speak.
Okay, I'll jump in. Look, national collaboration has been so important for us. It's so critical that we learn from what everybody's doing. It also supports everybody keeping on going. So you hear what's working in other places, you learn from them, you get that support to keep going. So while our characteristics are different, and we know that response needs to be local and it needs to consider the local conditions, because things that happen over here in WA are so different to what happens over on the East Coast. But every time our National Capacity Building Network meets, I learn something different, and I feel supported because we're all going through the same changes, the same challenges. So I think it is. It's lacking a little bit at the moment. There are gaps in it. There's no doubt about it. It would be fabulous to get a stronger community of practice for urban waterway management that was really effective across the country. I think we would see some really good progress. Yeah.
Yep. Anyone else?
I'm happy to follow on from Shelley. Yeah, I would agree with all Shelley's points, and particularly for us here in Tassie, where we're quite a small fish in the pond compared to the rest of the country. So it's a really good opportunity for us to share knowledge from our experience, being quite unique in the way that we're set up, again, as Shelley alluded to, in WA. But for us, it's also about, if something's already been done elsewhere in Australia, not having to reinvent the wheel and leveraging that expertise that's already around the country and helping create a solution that is useful in our local context. So not necessarily taking exactly the same program or project and implementing it here, but taking the learnings from that program or project from the experts that have actually done it and seeing how we can implement that into our local scale projects here, particularly in Tassie. So it is really, really important. It is definitely a gap, and I think there's been positive strides in that space, and it's something that we will continue to work on into the future. But that wider collaboration is really important to help, I guess, upskill everyone up to the same level, because there are, states are good at some things and other states are good at other things. So being able to get everybody onto the same sort of level playing field, this acts as one avenue to be able to do that.
Yep. Thanks, Philip. I guess to summarize that, it's all about what we're doing today. Just coming up together, sharing lessons, and then upscaling that to the national level. And also the point made by Shelley is to be open to learning and collaboration. I think that is key. So and again, I think the key message from today's session, what I take with me is that like good collaboration and demands like skills. It's similarly to leadership skills. We need to build leadership skills. So for collaboration, we need to build collaboration skills, except that what we've been hearing is that collaboration skills, it also comes with, you have to be, there's a bit of interpersonal skills, maintaining good working relationship, and all like interpersonal skills. So there's a bit of an overlap. So it's complex and but interesting. And there's proof of, you know, success stories of what successful collaboration, what impact it can achieve. So with that, I thank all the speakers and all the attendees for joining us today. And we might end the session here. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.